Thank you all for coming and being part of this. I appreciate that you're not out having a brownie with Mickey and enjoying that time here. I'm going to try to be just as entertaining as Mickey, but a little bit more relevant to your job, if I can be. He did a great job with the intro, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. And at the end, I'll introduce you to the broader cloud team, because you as enterprises, as government agencies, as other organizations that are on the inside of this, you're my customer. You're the one I spend the majority of my time with. And so everything I'm going to share with you here today is based on what your peers are doing. So I'm not here to give you a vendor pitch. I'm not here to tell you how great one piece of technology is versus another. I'm here to help you understand why enterprises are adopting cloud, how they're doing it, and what the reality is. So to get through that, let's start with what the bottom line is of where we currently are in enterprise adoption of cloud technologies. The majority of the adoption of cloud is public cloud. And it is not driven by you. Sorry about that. It's your business users, it's your end users, it is the people who interact with your customers who are the people who are leading the cloud charge. And they're doing this because they're trying to get their job done. They're doing this because they find services and capabilities either in their personal life or in other companies they worked in that work really effectively, that give them the agility, give them the ability to achieve the things they're trying to get done, and they bring them into your organization. And it's these empowered people, whether they be developers who bring in cloud platforms, or it be regular line employees who bring in Salesforce and Box.com and other type of solutions directly into your organization. You need to listen to these people, because these people are not trying to circumvent IT. They are not trying to get your assets stolen. They are not trying to break the rules. They're trying to satisfy your customer. They're trying to be productive in their job. And if you want a quick hint as to what you should do first in the public cloud, help them do what they're doing. Help them secure it. Help them incorporate it into the corporate processes. Help them see that this is something that they shouldn't have to put on their own credit card and then bill through their travel and expense budget, but it should be something that we use as a company. Because, as many of you know, when you sign up for one of these services and you see 6-point type for 65 pages and a really big accept button on the bottom, when they click accept, who just accepted? If they used your company address, your company just did. So you're in the cloud whether you wanted to or not. Now the question is, are you in control of that? Now the other big topic, of course, that happens all the time in cloud is private cloud. When it comes to private cloud, this is a work in progress. You will run into more of your peers. You will run into more organizations who claim they have a private cloud that do not have a private cloud. They're probably on the journey to having a private cloud, but a private cloud is a very unique implementation. Your VMware environment, as you run it today, is not a cloud. Is VMware relevant in how you build out a cloud? Probably, possibly. But you may choose to go in a different direction for that. But you can absolutely take what you're doing today with virtualization and you can turn it into a cloud. And we'll talk about what it actually takes to do that. And I'll give you a hint as to why I'm so confident that most people who claim they have a private cloud don't really have one. Because you don't get to answer that question. Because when your developers tell you, you're giving me the same value that I get from the public cloud, then you have a private cloud. If the developers think, I really wish it did self-service. Gee, I really wish I could get it in 15 minutes. Gee, I really wish that I didn't have to go through a budget process to get the resources I want. That's not a cloud. But what progress you're making is important, and you do need to keep working down that path. Third thing, a lot of people will tell you that hybrid is this future state that you will have when you have a private cloud and then you decide what you put in the public cloud. Anyone on board with that one? Good. Informed audience. You're already hybrid. And I can say that with a significant amount of confidence because it's very, very rare that I run into an organization, even a federal agency in the government, that is not already hybrid. And as I said with public, you didn't take the company there. Somebody else did. And you'll find this out when you realize that almost any SaaS application that a company is using within the first year gets connected to something running in the data center. The moment that happens, you're hybrid. So the reality and the key question you should be asking yourself is, how hybrid of an organization are we? And am I managing our hybrid state? Those are the more important questions. So we're going to get into all of this as we go down in here. Let's start with a little bit more of the reality of the first part. You will always hear from a lot of customers that the reason people go to the cloud is because it is cheaper. That is not true. The reason people go to the cloud is because it is faster, it is easier, it is frictionless, and it allows them to get a new service and a new capability the way they need it at their skill set in a means that they can achieve without having to go through hoops and hurdles to get it done. All the surveys we do where we ask almost anyone in any role and any capability why you started to take advantage of cloud services, it is always about speed, agility, and productivity. Now, you will see them say that they went there because it matched their skill set. That's why you see on this slide Java support comes up. A lot of developers go to the cloud and they pick the cloud that enabled them to be productive as a developer with their skill set. And if they're a Java developer, they will pick the cloud that gives them the full Java middleware already pre-deployed, ready for them to deploy. I don't have to manage the OS. I don't have to configure the middleware. I don't like patching that stuff, and I'm not interested in doing it. So if the cloud does it for me, bingo, productivity. Now, you will also always hear them, and you see this on this slide as well in the third line down, they will say, and it's cheaper. The key question to ask here is, do you believe that answer? Do you believe, more importantly, did they look into whether that answer was true or not? In more cases than not, they didn't even bother to look. They saw the inexpensive price, and that's why they went there. Now, is it actually cheaper? With the right application and the right use case? Probably. With the wrong application, with the wrong use case, clearly it's going to cost more. So the key here is they went there because there was a perception that it was cheaper. And in many cases, cheaper might have been that it was below the T&E threshold, which meant I could expense it. And so that is a very different metric than whether it's actually cheaper, and a much more powerful one. So the key thing I want you to take away from this is that cloud may be cheaper. Don't worry about that particular part of it. But recognize that price is a powerful element that we in IT don't use to our advantage. But the public cloud does. And they use it to our disadvantage. So think about how that might apply in your case and how you could do something with that. Okay, now we do see when we talk to developers, we do see a high degree of desire by developers to use cloud services for all the reasons that I mentioned. And when you ask just developers who have some experience with cloud, which is the case with this particular survey, and you ask them what % of the server-side code that they have written in the last year went onto the cloud, you get the top line there, which says current. And what you see in the different colors or shades of blue in that line is the % of server-side code, a % of respondents said they're moving to the cloud or put into the cloud. And the biggest section of that bar, the 40%, that's 40% of the respondents saying that less than 20% of their code went up into the cloud. That's pretty realistic. All the other surveys we do show that there's only about 30% of developers who have experience using a cloud platform and deploying applications to it, and they're doing a very small percentage of their applications. That's why the second line is really interesting as well, because now we're asking them in 2 years, how much of the server-side code that you write will be deployed into the cloud? And the 40% has fallen now to 11%, and the rest of these sections have grown. The section that has grown the most is 30%. 30% of the same respondents said that between 60 and 79% of their server-side code they're going to write in 2015 is going to go in the cloud. Now, does that correlate to 60 to 79% of your entire application portfolio will be running in the cloud in 2015? Absolutely not. What does it correlate to? It correlates to the developers who are on the front end of your organization, the people who could declare themselves DevOps, the ones who work in the business units, who work for marketing, who work in consultancies and agencies that have been hired by other parts of your organization. That's who we're talking about. And what kind of apps are they building? They're building systems of engagement. They're building applications that directly impact customers. They're building your new mobile applications. They're building your new Internet of Things applications. They're building things that face your employees. These class of applications are the ones that are moving the fastest because customers are in charge of these relationships. And when they want a different experience on the latest device that is native to that device and gives them a really good experience, and your application doesn't do it, how much time do you have to make your application do that? It's a lot shorter than it used to be. You don't have next year to do that. Because if your competitor adds it to their capability and you don't, and it's relatively easy for the customer to switch, you're in trouble. And I'll tell you one particular example where that is the case. How many of you get your prescriptions filled at CVS? Okay, so Walgreens has a really nice mobile application that lets you take your phone and take a photograph of the barcode of your prescription. And it will automatically go into Walgreens and be prepared for renewal. Guess whose barcodes that reads? CVS barcodes. So, if you're CVS and you recognize this, how much time do you have to address this problem in your mobile application? That's the motivation, that's the pressure that is on the developers that are answering this question. And that's why they're saying they are going to move huge amounts of their code there, because they have to move now. They have to have platforms that take advantage of some of the new capabilities, that provide innovations to them that they don't have to write, where they can simply do a RESTful API call to a service or capability, and that function is now available. Those are the kind of applications we're talking about. Now, if you look inside of your application portfolio, you might say that only 20% of my apps are systems of engagement. The rest of my applications, they're back office stuff, they're subject to regulation, subject to compliance. Those things aren't going to move to the cloud, and you're probably right. They're probably not going to move to the cloud. But they might just get impacted by this move to the cloud. And that's why focusing on hybrid is so critical to getting this right. So here, let me give you an example of another one of these applications that these developers are building. So you're someone who likes fitness, or your company is involved in fitness in some way, whether that is an insurance company, whether you sell fitness equipment, whether you are building smart meters or smart scales. Yes, intelligent scales. I don't have one, as you can tell. You want to have an engagement with the customer that has a real-time aspect to it, but also drives commercial behavior. So in this particular case, you start with a mobile application that this person is going to put their phone on their arm as they go out for their run. This application is going to take advantage of the GPS on the phone. It's going to take advantage of the Wi-Fi in the phone. It's taking advantage of a bunch of sensors on the phone so it can capture the pace this person is running at, where they are running, when was the last time they ran this course, how fast did they complete that last course, what goals they have, and who's in their social network who also has run this course in the past. Because you want to take all that information, and while they're running along, you want to be able to say to them, Bill did this course yesterday. You're ahead of him by 3 seconds. Keep it up. Or, Susan ran this course 4 hours ago. You're way behind. Maybe you ought to pick it up. This is a lot of information that this application is going to be gathering. And in order for it to give you this kind of feedback, it can't live entirely within the phone. It has to be able to aggregate the information. It has to call cloud services to be effective in this regard. And so this application will end up moving a bunch of data up into a cloud environment where it can scale out in the morning when everybody's running. But then you can shrink the cost of that set of resources in the midday when not as many people are doing it. So if you've got an application with a heavy degree of elasticity, clouds are great because since you're paying by the hour, you can pay for the most when you need it and pay for the least when you don't. You can also do real-time analysis because when Bill is out running on this course and he does pick it up, you want to be able to tell him the moment he's caught Susie and now is ahead of him. Telling him 15 minutes or 30 minutes later isn't good enough. So you want to be able to take all this information and move really quick. Now, another reason you're going to move this up into the cloud is because if you're successful, there's not Bill out there running with this application. There's 400,000 Bills running out there on the course at exactly the same time. And where Bill's particular use of the application might not cause a huge amount of traffic going through, take that, multiply it by 500,000, and now you've got a huge amount of data that's flowing through. Now, I don't know how many of you manage the firewalls in your company, but how excited would you be to have 500,000 consumers flooding your firewall with traffic coming through? By the way, this is traffic that's not personally identifiable and is not going to drive any revenue action of any kind. Anyone ready to do that? I think Barracuda would be happy to sell you some stuff to go with that. Now, Bill's finished his run. He's used all the real-time data to beat Susie. He's super excited. He goes on Facebook, tells everybody that he beat him. Now they all have to go back out and run the next time. But now the app is also going to tell him, hey, Bill, congratulations. You've just hit 300 miles on those shoes. They're done. So we really recommend that you buy some new ones. So now you want that app to have a person-identifiable conversation. Now you want him to log in. Now you want to take his credit card information. Now you want to show him the latest products and be sure that you deliver that to them. You may not yet be comfortable doing that in the cloud. You may be more likely to say, well, let's just take that information and let's put it on a skinnier pipe and let's push it back down to the corporate data center. That's a really good architecture. And it's hybrid from day one. Now, what is also more powerful here is if this developer does not have to build an e-commerce solution unique to this application. What's more effective is if he can tap into your e-commerce system that is running inside of your core banking system today. If he can do that, that's so much easier for him. So, how comfortable are you exposing your Oracle finance system, which is audited every year by that Oracle sales friend of yours, exposing a whole bunch of new connections to a whole bunch of mobile applications and new capabilities? Get comfortable. Find a way to do this. More commonly, you're going to see them say, give me a RESTful API to these capabilities. That's what I get from the native cloud services. You should step up to that. That does not necessarily mean exposing the Oracle financial system, but it does mean putting caching layers in front of it, putting API management layers in front of it, allowing that to become a RESTful service that he can consume. And that's the kind of impact that the rest of your business is going to feel. And that's why I say it's really important. Think hybrid from the beginning. Think about the services and capabilities you have internally that those developers, the noisy, obnoxious developers building the cool new things, might need. Because what we have also found is that these developers will find a way. What do I mean by find a way? These developers will come to you and say, I really want to tap into the Oracle rack. I need to get access to this set of files. And your immediate response will be, no. He says, well, okay, fine, I can't get to the main database, but can I, at least for testing purposes, can I get a snapshot? Okay, fine. Guess what just became production? And I'm not saying this as a hypothetical. This has happened. And so you need to be aware that when these developers are under the pressures I talked about to be effective, to be delivering the value that they're asked to do. And by the way, they may not work in your department. And they may not even work for your company. They may work for Razorfish. They may work for a number of companies, ThoughtWorks, others who were brought in by your marketing department or your product team to make this stuff happen. So that when you say no, that simply means to them, no this direction, but not no to the project. And they find another way to do it. Now, legacy applications, a lot of people say, migrate your legacy applications to the cloud. That'll make it most effective. That's a bad idea. Your legacy applications are spaghetti code. They were written by a guy who left the company in '77. They're based on an ERP system that even SAP doesn't want to sell support on any longer. They're very brittle. They require 17 integrity blades connected to an EMC storage through these very unique connections. And there's two guys who spend all day monitoring that service. If you try to pick that up and put it in the cloud, if you try to pick it up and put it in traditional hosting, let's just be honest, if you try to pick it up and move it at all, it will cost you more and it will fall over. Everybody has an app of some kind like that. And this should be on your list of things to do and move to the cloud, the very last item in that catalog. But that doesn't mean that that application can't play in the cloud world. So I'm going to give you a scenario, a real scenario of a company that faces this exact same problem, but started to face this problem in the 90s. So how many of you travel on a regular basis? And do you recognize that when you do that and you book that seat, that seat gets booked by one company in most cases? Sabre, out of Dallas. And did you know that when you say, I will now buy seat 11F, and you hit that accept button, that hits a mainframe? The reason it hits a mainframe, those of you that understand the mainframe know why, because they would really rather only sell seat 11F on the 5 p.m. flight once. Mainframes are very, very good at ensuring that it is only sold once. If you have to do a verified write of something in a very big system, that's what they're really, really good at. The problem with the mainframe is its user experience is kind of lacking. And in the 90s, it was kind of lacking too, because we had this new thing coming out called the web. And we really didn't want to tell anyone who wanted to use the Sabre system that you must learn how to use and buy a green screen terminal. And so what happened during this time frame is that a bunch of companies, Sabre was involved in this process as well, said let's create green screen scraping technologies that will take the information that comes out to a green screen and let's remap it into HTML so that we can incorporate travel into the web world. And the way they did this is they didn't replace the mainframe. They didn't add function to the mainframe. They surrounded the mainframe with a web infrastructure. And I worked at Sun Microsystems, and a lot of those systems came from us, so I thank everybody for moving to the web. Thank you very much. My stock price was good at the time. We are actually doing exactly the same thing now in the cloud era, where we surrounded the legacy applications with the web infrastructure to accommodate the web. We now need to surround these applications again, but now with the ability to do RESTful API exposure, to talk to mobile user interfaces, to incorporate and enable SaaS integrations, and to empower web services implementations, whether they be SOAP using an SOA architecture or REST or other mechanisms. And by surrounding the applications, we can actually shield them from the integration points. We can protect them from being impacted. Now, the other thing we can do in this regard is we can take advantage of these outer two layers by shifting functionality. So another thing that happens in the travel industry, and why Sabre is another good example here again, is that the amount of time that you spend looking for a flight is extremely larger than the amount of time you spend booking the one you finally found. And this is a ratio of what's called looks to books. Most of us in all of our applications see a similar ratio between reads and writes. Most of the traffic to most applications is read. And if that is the case, as was the case in the travel industry, I don't need to do read using the same technology and the same systems that do write, because reading doesn't require the same level of exactness. And so what happened during the web era, and is absolutely happening right now with Sabre, is they're taking all the read function and they're pushing it out into the outer two layers. So as soon as inventory from United Airlines comes into Sabre, it goes into Sabre, verified that it's there, into the mainframe, and then boom, out it goes into the outer two layers. And by doing so, that allows them to take all the read traffic and now handle it in an elastic fashion. So the mainframe does not get impacted by this. And by pulling these functionality out, now I can actually shrink the footprint of the legacy. And by decreasing the amount of money I spend on MIPS, I can spend a lot more money on the user experience, on the outer two layers. And that's what allows my company to take this legacy position, which was an immovable object, and advance. And this is a great way that cloud can help you achieve this. That blue outer layer might be inside your corporate walls, might be outside your corporate walls. And you should be thinking about leveraging both where they make the most sense in your organization. Now, let's talk a little bit more about private clouds, because that is really, as you can see in this survey data, IT's point of view. And let's be honest with ourselves. A lot of the reason we want to do a private cloud is because if everything went out to the public cloud, what would we do? The reality and the answer to that question is we'd still be here. We'd still be just as busy. We'd probably have a slightly different job. But there's no IT jobs going away because we're moving to the public cloud. But it's not entirely all about us. We have these things called boards. We have these things called security offices. We have people out there who, frankly, are worried about putting their data out into the cloud. And that's quite understandable. And that's not a fight that we're going to win with a technological argument. But it is one that we can help address if we can bring some of the same value propositions from the public cloud into our organization, particularly if they drive greater efficiency and they drive greater agility in a way that everyone socially and culturally is comfortable with. But sadly, as I mentioned before, not all private clouds are really private clouds. Because what does it actually take to be a private cloud? Well, as I said, it is defined by the end user of that cloud resource, in more cases than not, your developer. And if your developer has experience with the public cloud, the bar has been set. His expectations for what he gets from a private cloud were set by that public cloud. And in the public cloud, he can request resources on his own. He can have those resources provisioned to him in 15 minutes or less. Those resources and everything from the virtual machine layer down is managed and maintained by the cloud provider. He doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff. And he expects the same thing. He expects that you're going to give him self-service. He expects that you're going to be fully automated so that when he asks for something, it is not going to go through this committee, then that committee, then off to the networking guy, off to the storage guy, and then eventually get approved and delivered out. And no improvement from 6 weeks is how long it takes to get you a fully functioning VM today to 1 week is good enough. 15 minutes is the bar. So it will take your organization really understanding this difference to move forward. And when you get to a fully automated, fully standardized, fully self-service value proposition, you'll find that IT benefits big time. Now, I know many of you are quite concerned. If you do self-service to your developers, they will run amok. They will create chaos. If you give them the free rein, they will take every bit of resources you could possibly give them, and they will park on top of them for the rest of the time that they have access. Is that familiar to anyone? This is where you want to take advantage of the pricing model that I talked about in the cloud. So why do you think the public clouds price resources per hour? They do it for two reasons. Number one, when you take a resource and you divide it by the amount of hours in a day, actually, let's do it better. You take how much you would have charged per year from that, and you divide it down to the hour. Man, does it look cheap. 8 cents an hour compared to $3,000 for a fully landed server cost in the data center. We're not even on the same page, right? So that's the first reason that they do it. The second reason they do it is so that every hour you are reminded you are still using it and you are still paying for it. That is what we call incenting them to leave. And that's what you need to think about in your private cloud. Now, the other part of self-service that worries people is self-service will mean they will create any kind of workload they want. They'll ignore our enterprise architecture standards. They'll ignore our middleware standards. They'll just put whatever they want in there. Self-service actually prevents that from happening. So think about this. If it now currently takes 6 weeks for a developer to get a new virtual environment that he can use for test and development purposes, and you want to deliver 15 minutes, where would you start? Well, I would start with our corporate enterprise architecture standards, all the middleware components that we agree upon and are approved to use, and the types of configurations that I know I can feel confident will run effectively. Now, that might be, as opposed to anything and everything the developer wants, that might be a set of 10 choices, and that's all you can get. Your immediate reaction from your developers will be, I want whatever it is I want, why isn't it there? And that was their first reaction to the public cloud, too. But then, when they realized, out of these 10, I can have one of them in 15 minutes. To get exactly what I want is 6 weeks. You know, that third one, it's close. It's pretty darn close to what I want. Let's go. That's exactly what will start to happen. And if only those 10 choices are the ones you feel 100% confident will run efficiently and effectively, and that you can meet a single SLA for all of those deployments, boy, that's much better than the situation you're in right now. Because now, you're running whatever it is they give you to run, configured whatever way it's been set up. And how many SLAs are you supporting today? So self-service is actually to your advantage. So these are the things that you want to be thinking about as you approach a private cloud. And leverage the public cloud not as a defense that you have to fight against or a competitor to you. Leverage it as a model that guides your creation of the cloud solution. And that's where you can actually look to companies who have a public cloud as well as a private cloud offering, because they've already got fidelity between the two. And when you've got fidelity between the two, then you can start making another decision. I don't want to run everything in my private cloud. I certainly don't want somebody doing a stress test that involves 5,000 machines hitting his 2 machines. I may not have 5,000 machines in my cloud. But if I ask them to do that work in the public cloud, that's a great use. Same thing if I have a really nicely performing web application, but I have a Christmas. Do you really want Christmas to happen to your data center? When Christmas can happen in somebody else's data center and 3 months later the bill for that goes to 0? That's a more effective way to go. So think about this as a hybrid architecture. Now, I'm not going to say that all private clouds are exactly the same, because that's not what we find in our research. We find in our research there's really 4 motivations for private clouds, and they have very different architectures when they're approached. The most common that most people do is what we call enhanced virtualization. That's the stepping stone toward private cloud, but you really don't want your end result to be a private cloud. This is kind of the journey that companies are on when they move from a standard VMware implementation using vCenter to now using vCAC, where you really want to do a little bit more robust policies and automation and standardization, but you're not ready for a fully automated environment. And that's a good result. You should actually, and you'll see in a little later slide, we actually endorse having that kind of a strategy as part of your portfolio. In the other cases, you may decide, I only need private cloud for test and dev. Because when we go to production, we are going to go back into the standard VMware environment. We don't have the elasticity. We don't have the transiency. But the test and dev process itself is transient. And so there's a benefit to having a cloud for that purpose. You might decide to do public cloud light, which means that I'm going to put a lot of stuff in the public cloud. But there's a few things I might just bring back down. And I'd like that to be exactly like the public cloud, but it's still only going to be a small subset. We see a lot of companies that do that. One company that did that and got a whole lot of publicity about it was Zynga. Any of you know Zynga? If you don't know Zynga, how many of you know Farmville? That's Zynga. So this is a game company that made a huge name for itself, being 100% in the public cloud for all their games, and then got big publicity later for saying that they've built their own data center and they're moving their apps back in. The reality is they're hybrid. Because what they've found out, and you may find this in your applications as well, when they launch a new game, they have no idea how popular that game is going to be. So what do? They launch it on the public cloud, where the elasticity allows them to really see how popular it is. And you probably know this about games as well. Movies are the same way. The moment it comes out, everybody wants to play it. 6 weeks later, slunk down pretty fall. When you get to about 6 weeks later, you kind of know how many people are going to keep playing the game. At that point, it's going to be the same amount of resources to support that entire audience playing that game. So now we're static. So should I be in the public cloud, where I'm paying per hour? Or should I be where I can amortize, where I can capitalize that audience? That's why they built public cloud light. You may also be saying to yourself, well, this company, I can't blow it up and rebuild it, but we got to transform. We've got to move to this new model. We've got to change. We've got to transform. We've got to become a different kind of company. I'm going to make all of IT become agile. We're going to make big, big changes. Those are really long projects, but they will result in a very different cloud environment as well. And we do see a few organizations going through this. We see this a lot in financial services, where companies are going to do a complete rework of their core banking system. And they want to time with that change, a change in all the systems that lie around it. These are risky. I don't actually recommend these, but I do see companies to go down these paths. And if that's the path you're going on, I'm not going to stop you from going there. But I'll take as many consulting hours from you as you would like to get that right. So if you go down these paths and you think hybrid, you will end up with a portfolio that looks like this. You will have a set of resources that you're going to spend CapEx dollars on, which is your physical internal data center resources, the apps that run on physical resources still and haven't been virtualized. You'll have your static virtualization environment running most likely still VMware going forward. And you'll have your internal private cloud. But you will also have things you don't want to take a CapEx position on, where they have no value for you to do so, where you want somebody else to put it on their books and you want to use OpEx dollars. Some of that will be traditional outsourcing. I don't want to run the mainframe anymore. Here, IBM, you manage it for me. Virtual hosting will be part of this portfolio. It's a lot like your static environment. You pay per month, you pay per year for the virtual machines, but they're outside your walls. Somebody else manages it. Somebody else maintains it. You don't have to worry about it. And then you'll have your public cloud. And in your public cloud, you will have the highly elastic, the highly transient workloads. Your challenge will be to manage this portfolio and figure out what applications should go where. And you may change that decision periodically. But by having a full portfolio of options available to you, now you can really optimize the use of your resources. Optimize the right app on the right platform within your right portfolio. Okay, so let's talk about some recommendations. So first and foremost, your journey to the cloud already started. The first step in any process change, and there's probably 12 steps, is admit that you have a problem. So given that you know that your company is out there and is already doing things in the public cloud, reach out. Find out what services your company employees are using, why they're using them. Not so that you can squash it, but so you can learn. Because as I said, it's very rare that we run into an employee who said, F the company, I'm going to the cloud. It's usually, let's help the customer. That's why I went to the cloud. And if you can understand why he did this, and you can understand that that's an actual good use case, and I can manage it, I can monitor it, I can make it fit, then you've just found a way to be relevant to that employee again. Pay attention to the economic model, but don't let economics drive your thinking. Use the economic model to understand we're doing this in the cloud, it is providing agility, but it might actually be incurring costs we're not ready to fully burden ourselves with. That might suggest that we need to look for alternatives, might suggest that we need to try doing something internally, and most importantly, understand a key concept in cloud called the uneven handshake. So let me explain what I mean by that. So an uneven handshake is a very different concept, very consistent with public cloud services. When you consume public cloud services, you do not have the option to bend them over for the SLA that you want. You do not have the option to change how they configure the environment. You do not have the option to tell them how they will run their shop. The reason you don't have that option is because they have built one multi-tenant service that hundreds, if not thousands of customers are all using at the same time. Which means that if they have to do a unique SLA, a unique configuration, a unique setup for you, they have to do you separately. They have to do you differently. And the moment they have to do that, they're no longer a cloud service. Now they're a managed service. And if they're going to be a managed service for you, you're going to pay for that. You're going to sign up for a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract, and you're going to live in your isolated bubble. And you're going to give up all the efficient benefits and all the agility that you would have gotten by playing in the same pool as everybody else. Now, given that that is the case, you're going to run into a lot of cloud services. You're going to see their SLA, and you're going to say, no way. 99.5, are you kidding? Not for my application. I want 99.95. What do you mean there's no performance SLA? How am I going to make sure my application performance is good? Somebody's got to solve this problem. Well, guess who gets to solve this problem? You do. It's not the service provider's problem. It's yours. And more often than not, they're going to give you configuration tools. They're going to give you customization tools. They're going to give you the ability to bring your own agents, bring your own technologies, and that's how you're going to solve the problem. But you may not want to do that, and you may not have the experience to do it, and that's okay. If you don't, that's what managed service providers are there to do. That's what professional services companies are there to do. And if they are certified on the cloud services that you are using, that's who you talk to about the unique SLA. If you don't want to manage the OS, but you want to run on infrastructure as a service, that's the role that they're going to provide to you. And you can achieve higher SLAs than the base SLA of a cloud service on a cloud service by embracing the uneven handshake. Okay, a couple more recommendations for you. On the private cloud front, talk to your developers first, find out what they want from a private cloud, and that's what you should build. Don't think from, I'm running virtualization, if I add a little automation, if I add a little standardization, I'm there, and don't declare victory too soon. Concentrate very much on that, and remember that self-service is your friend. And then think hybrid now. Since you're already exposed, think about how do I get a handle on this, and how do I prevent this from getting worse as it goes forward. If you have 5 SaaS applications and there are 65 connections from those 5 SaaS applications going all over the data center, you're in trouble. You want to have an integration architecture that says any outside service talking to this system talks this way through this service. And don't make that a service that worked in the 90s. Make that a service that the developers actually want to use now, which means use REST. You can fall back to SOAP if you need to, but rest is where you should be mostly focusing on in this point forward. And then you can shift the whole organization to, we are hybrid. And as a result, we need to move at the pace of our business in the parts of the business that need to move at that appropriate pace. And that's how you're going to get victory in this cloud world. So thanks so much for your time.